I didn't set out to become an entrepreneur. I just wanted out. Out of the cubicle. Out of the daily 9 to 6 grind. Out of watching my manager nod silently through meetings, pretending we were innovating when all we did was shuffle reports and slide decks to one another like corporate hot potatoes. For context, I was a mid-level marketing manager at a mid-tier SaaS company in Boston. Not the worst job in the world, but slowly, quietly, it was draining the soul out of me. The beginning of the end started with a budget spreadsheet. I had just been assigned to manage a minor campaign promoting a new integration our software had developed. Nothing big. A couple of blog posts, email drips, some paid ads. But I noticed something off in the numbers. Our cost per lead was through the roof on Google Ads, and it didn't make sense. We weren't targeting competitive keywords, and the quality scores were decent. I dug in. Spent a weekend analyzing data. Long story short, we were bleeding money because of lazy automation and duplicate targeting across multiple ad platforms. Essentially, Google and Bing were bidding against each other using our own budgets. I wrote a report, showed it to my boss. He said, "Thanks, we'll loop that into the Q4 strategy," and shelved it. That was the moment. I realized I was putting effort into something that no one cared to fix. That same week, I called an old friend from college, Jay, who was a full-stack dev and had recently left his job after his startup folded. I said, "I want to build something. I don't know what, but I'm done with this." He said, "All right, come over." That first night, we drank whiskey and brainstormed for hours. We talked about pain points in our jobs, automation gaps, terrible workflows. By 3 a.m., we circled in on something. Small marketing teams in B2B companies had no easy way to visualize ad spend across platforms. It was either enterprise-level tools with 5-figure pricing or clunky dashboards built in Google Data Studio. We could build something lighter, simpler. We called it FluxView. It started as a Chrome extension that pulled in ad spend data from multiple platforms and showed daily trends in one dashboard. We built an MVP over the next 6 weeks. Jay coded, I designed the UI, and drafted cold outreach emails. We were both still unemployed at that point, burning savings and living on ramen and stale ambition. Our first 10 users came from Reddit. I posted on our /marketing and our /PPC. Built a free tool to track multi-platform ad spend. Need beta testers. Surprisingly, people responded. A few even gave constructive feedback. One person DM'd me asking if we could build in Facebook integration. Another asked for email alerts. We scrambled to add these features. By month 3, we had 300 active users. That's when the real grind began. Users were happy, but no one wanted to pay. We made the tool free to attract feedback, but converting free users into paid ones was a brutal uphill slog. I started calling users one by one. I'd ask, what would make this worth paying for? Most said, nothing. It's cool, but not essential. I felt crushed. It was a gut punch I hadn't anticipated. I had poured my energy into this, and yet, maybe it wasn't a business. Maybe it was just a nice hobby. Jay was more grounded about it. He said, let's pivot a bit. Let's make it essential. We doubled down on alerting and reporting. We added Slack integrations, anomaly detection, e.g., your CPCs have spiked 40% today, and built connectors for HubSpot and Salesforce. Within a month, the tone of user feedback shifted. Marketing managers started saying things like, this actually saved me a ton of time this week. We launched on Product Hunt. Got #3 product of the day. That drove another 1,000 users our way. We introduced pricing. $19/month for individual marketers. $89/month for teams. 50 people subscribed in the first week. I remember staring at the Stripe dashboard, refreshing it like a maniac. Seeing real money come in for something we built from scratch was surreal. It wasn't enough to live off yet, but it was proof. Over the next 6 months, we scaled slowly. We focused on customer support, churn reduction, and reaching out to agencies. We offered white-labeled dashboards. Agencies loved it. They could send automated reports to clients without manually compiling ad data. Revenue hit $15K MRR by the end of year 1. Jay and I paid ourselves $2K/month and reinvested the rest. We hired a part-time support person and contracted a designer. We didn't seek VC money. We didn't want a board or a runway deadline. We wanted control. Some days were thrilling. Others were soul-draining. We had a major bug that once wiped dashboard histories for 200 users. I spent 48 hours writing apologies and helping restore data. Another time, an update to the Google Ads API broke our integration overnight. I was at my cousin's wedding, in a suit, debugging on my phone in the bathroom. But we made it work. In year 2, we hit $40K MRR. We had 5 full-time team members. Agencies began referring other agencies. We added data visualization tools, a report builder, and even an AI assistant to draft summaries. A few VCs came knocking. We declined. Jay and I made a pact early on. No investors until we hit $1 MARR. We wanted to grow on our terms. I'm writing this now from a small office we just moved into last week. Brick walls, second-hand chairs, coffee machine that hisses like a demon. It's ours. Last Friday, a customer messaged me. FluxView alerted us to a weird anomaly in Facebook ads. Turns out we were hacked. Saved us thousands. Thank you. It hit me hard. Not because of the money, but because this weird, scrappy idea born out of frustration and a spreadsheet, was actually helping people. I'm still scared some days. We're bootstrapped and always a few bad months from needing to make hard decisions. But I wake up energized now. I care. I'm building something real. And I'm never going back to that cubicle. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I accidentally started a $2.4M business after getting laid off from a startup I didn't even like. In February 2021, I was working at a mid-sized startup in the food delivery space. You know the type, kombucha in the fridge, endless Slack channels, but zero clarity on what the hell we were building. I was a mid-level PM with a pretty basic salary and almost no equity. Still, it paid the bills. Then came the Friday Zoom. You probably already know what happened. Realignment of company priorities. Difficult decision. 42 of us were let go that day. I kept a straight face through the call, but when the Slack stopped working and my email bounced, I just stared at my monitor like it had betrayed me. My severance was trash, 6 weeks of pay, that's it. I live in Oakland, where 6 weeks of rent is basically a vacation, not a buffer. I started job hunting the next day, sending out resumes, optimizing my LinkedIn, doing all the usual nonsense. No bites. Or if there were bites, they were unpaid co-founder gigs or jobs that paid less than my rent. I had to make money quickly, and I didn't have any world-changing app ideas or angel investors on speed dial. But I did have this weird side hobby, digital forms. Yeah, digital forms. Like Typeform, Google Forms, all that. I'd always been kind of obsessed with how people collected data. While working at the startup, I built a bunch of internal workflows for them using no-code tools like Airtable, Jotform, and Zapier. No one else wanted to touch it, so I became the de facto automation guy. Desperate, I posted on a random Slack group I was in for no-code enthusiasts. Hey, if anyone needs help setting up automations or form workflows, I've got time. That was it. Just a short post at 11 p.m. 2 DMs came in that week. One was a seed-stage e-commerce company trying to automate their return form system. The other was a small HR consultancy needing an onboarding form connected to Google Sheets and Slack. I charged $250 each. It felt like a scam. They paid without blinking. By the end of that month, I had made $500. More than unemployment. I called it FormFlow because the domain was available for $7. Here's where things snowballed. A woman who worked at the HR consultancy referred me to another team doing onboarding for remote workers. That team wanted 12 forms built out, with automations tied to Notion, Trello, and Slack. They paid $6,000. That month I made more than I ever did in my PM job. It was still just me. No website, no pitch deck. Just a Notion page and some cold emails. But I kept getting referred. I joined startup forums and offer free 15-minute calls to help with workflow strategy. At least half of those turned into paid gigs. By August 2021, I was making $25K/month. It still didn't feel real. My office was my kitchen table, and I was doing most of the work in pajamas. I finally built a landing page using Card, added a Calendly link, and started branding myself as workflow infrastructure for early-stage startups. Then a client from Brazil asked if I could integrate Twilio with their form submissions. I said, of course, and figured it out that weekend. That unlocked a whole new vertical, SMS-based form workflows for low-bandwidth regions. I hired my first contractor on Upwork to help with back-end integrations I couldn't handle. By December 2021, I had a team of 4 contractors. I was clearing around $48K month in revenue. My overhead was low, mostly salaries and software. The margins were nearly 60%. I resisted forming an agency for a while, but eventually I incorporated as Formflow Systems LLC and went full service. Forms, automations, internal dashboards. We called ourselves plumbers for startup data. We've never done paid marketing. It's all word of mouth, Twitter, Slack groups, and 2 guest podcasts I did early on. But I started getting inquiries from Series A and B startups who needed compliance-friendly internal tooling, think HIPAA and SOC 2, and didn't want to burn dev resources building it. In 2022, we did $1.2 million in revenue. I finally started paying myself a proper salary $120K a year, plus profit draws. I hired a proper project manager, shout out to Dana, and gave my original Upwork contractor a full-time role. We've now got a team of 11, all remote, all part-time or contractor-based except for 2 full-time employees. Fast forward to 2024, and we're pacing for $2.4 million this year. We've launched a SaaS product called MiniFlow, a stripped-down builder for embedded forms, but the services business still brings in 80% of the cash. I still haven't raised money. I own 100% of the business. But here's the wild part. I don't even like forms that much anymore. I like solving problems, and forms are just the doorway. I get excited when a founder says, I need a way to collect and route onboarding data across 5 tools with audit logs and SMS support. That's like catnip. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. My resume used to be this mix of generalist roles at failed startups. But now, I run a profitable company that solves a niche problem really well. My family finally stopped asking when I'll get a real job. Some lessons I learned the hard way. 1. Small problems are gold mines. Everyone wants to reinvent the wheel. I just made the existing wheel roll smoother. 2. Charge more. The first time I quoted $10K for a workflow, I was sure they'd laugh. They accepted in 5 minutes. 3. Referrals, ads. Focus on delighting the client sitting in front of you. They'll bring 3 more. 4. Don't hire until it hurts. I waited too long to hire a PM, and I was drowning in client emails. Hire just before the pain becomes unsustainable. 5. Own something. Services are unsexy, but no one can disrupt my client relationships. Some days I think about selling. I've had offers. But I also like waking up and seeing that our team in Argentina just finished a project while I was asleep. I like knowing I built something sustainable from panic and boredom. If you're reading this and stuck between jobs, wondering what the hell to do next, solve a tiny problem for one person. Then do it again. That's all I did. I never intended to be an entrepreneur. Honestly, I didn't even like the word. I used to think entrepreneur was just a fancy title people gave themselves on LinkedIn when they were unemployed. Now I run a multi-million-dollar logistics tech startup out of Pittsburgh, and I got here because of one pissed-off trucker, a broken vending machine, and a weekend I'll never forget. 2 years ago, I was working in middle management at a packaging company. Boring job. Good pay, decent benefits, and a team that knew how to pretend they liked each other for 8 hours a day. I wasn't miserable, but I wasn't happy either. I was just there. My job involved coordinating freight deliveries and keeping things moving on schedule. Every week, something would go wrong. Shipments would be late, truckers would be angry, or inventory would be miscounted. It was just part of the job. But one Thursday, things went off the rails. We had a shipment of medical packaging materials that needed to get to a factory in Cincinnati by 6 a.m. Friday. The truck showed up late, and the driver, Mike, was livid. The warehouse team had taken too long to load. He had been waiting for hours, and dispatch had sent him an outdated route that would run him straight into construction traffic. I tried to calm him down, offered him a Coke from the vending machine in the break room. But, of course, the machine ate his money. That was the last straw for Mike. He slammed his fist into the vending machine, which started rattling like it was about to fall over, and yelled, "You know what? The whole system's broken. Nobody knows what the hell anyone else is doing." And then he stormed out. I stood there, staring at the vending machine, and I started thinking about what he said. The whole system's broken. He wasn't wrong. Dispatch used outdated software. The warehouse used a completely different system that barely synced. Drivers had zero visibility into real-time traffic, and we had to call them manually to update routes. Half the time, we didn't even know where a truck was once it left the yard. We relied on spreadsheets and emails, and everyone just kind of hoped it would work out. That night, I went home, cracked a beer, and started sketching out an idea. I didn't know how to code, but I could map out the process. What if there was one dashboard that connected dispatch, drivers, warehouse, and clients? Real-time GPS tracking, AI-optimized routing, instant inventory updates, a platform that let everyone talk to each other without relying on 6 different systems and a whiteboard. It wasn't a new idea, but it felt like nobody had done it right for small to mid-sized logistics companies. By Sunday night, I had 14 pages of notes and a name, Yardlink. The next morning, I called in sick. And then the next day, and the next. On Friday, I quit. Everyone thought I was losing my mind. My parents were confused. My girlfriend, now wife, was supportive but nervous. I had a bit of savings, but no tech background, no co-founder, no product. Just an idea and a notebook full of flowcharts. I took a part-time job bartending nights to stay afloat and spent my days teaching myself basic wireframing and UX design. I joined a few local founder Slack groups and eventually met a guy named Eli, a developer who had just gotten laid off from a failed edtech startup. We hit it off immediately. He was quiet, brilliant, and skeptical of everything, exactly what I needed. We built the first prototype of Yardlink in 4 months. It was ugly but functional. I scraped together $7,000 from some friends and my last credit card and got a basic app hosted. Then I started cold calling. My first 50 calls went nowhere. People hung up, laughed, or said they already had systems in place. But on call number 51, a small logistics company based in Akron said, "Sure, I'll look at your demo." I drove 2 hours that afternoon and gave a presentation on my laptop in their break room while their drivers ate sandwiches and stared at me like I was insane. But the owner saw the potential. He signed up for a free 60-day trial. We made every mistake you could imagine. Features broke constantly. Eli was pulling 18-hour days. I was doing customer support and onboarding while begging local investors to return my emails. But that Akron company stuck with us. Then they told a friend. Within 6 months, we had 11 clients, all small logistics firms that had been operating off spreadsheets and legacy systems. Our software wasn't pretty, but it worked, and more importantly, it made their lives easier. That's when things got real. One of our early adopters landed a contract with a national retailer and brought us along as their backend platform. Suddenly, we were being vetted by a billion-dollar company. We scrambled to scale up. We brought on 2 new developers and a head of customer success. I pitched at a local startup accelerator and got accepted. We received $100,000 in seed funding. In year 2, we hit $750K in ARR. I remember the first time a major VC took a meeting with me. I was wearing my only blazer and standing in a WeWork conference room in Chicago with sweaty palms. I gave the same pitch I'd done 100 times, but this time, someone said yes. We closed a $2.1 million seed round 4 weeks later. That changed everything. We could hire a real team, invest in product design, and market beyond word of mouth. By year 3, Yardlink was on pace to break $5 million in revenue. We had over 300 customers across the Midwest, and our platform had been integrated into 2 national logistics chains. I'm not saying this to brag. I still feel like I'm flying by the seat of my pants. There are fires every day. Customer churn keeps me up at night. Fundraising is brutal. I've made hiring mistakes, had sleepless nights, and once had to personally drive a malfunctioning server to a data center at 2 a.m. in a snowstorm because AWS botched a migration. But I wouldn't trade any of it. Mike, the pissed-off trucker from the beginning? He's now one of our product advisors. Turns out he's semi-retired and has become our unofficial driver advocate, who gives blunt, incredibly useful feedback on every new feature we design. The vending machine still doesn't work, but it sparked something. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of frustration to see an opportunity everyone else is too used to notice. I never expected to build a business around something as mundane as used office furniture, but here we are. The entire thing started with me getting fired. I was 27, a mid-level account manager for a dying B2B tech startup in Austin. One morning, we had a mandatory 8 a.m. Zoom call. By 8:15, Half the company was gone. By 8:30, I was walking out of the building with a severance packet, a box of desk junk, and a weird sense of relief. I had been on the verge of quitting anyway. Like any suddenly unemployed person with too much time and not enough prospects, I spent the next 2 weeks going down internet rabbit holes. One night, half drunk on gas station wine, I saw a Craigslist ad for a liquidation sale at a corporate office downtown. Desks, chairs, filing cabinets, the works. I went, thinking maybe I could grab a decent desk for my apartment. What I found instead was a goldmine. It was an open-floor tech company that had gone belly up after their Series B imploded. I walked into this cold, gray tomb of a space with Herman Miller chairs stacked like dominoes, conference tables gathering dust, and these stupid but fancy $600 whiteboards. Everything was priced to move. I ended up buying 2 chairs, a small desk, and a standing desk for $180 total. I posted them that same night on Facebook Marketplace. Within 24 hours, I'd sold the chairs for $250 each. At first, I thought I had just gotten lucky, but then I started paying more attention to the listings. Companies were folding left and right. The pandemic had emptied half the city's commercial real estate. Warehouses, call centers, ad agencies, so many of them were selling stuff for pennies on the dollar. So, I kept going. I borrowed my roommate's truck and hit up another liquidation sale in Round Rock. Then another in South Austin. I learned fast, don't waste time on particle board desks or broken file cabinets. Go for ergonomic chairs, solid with tables, whiteboards, and dual monitor arms. I'd grab what I could, clean it up, take half-decent pictures, and post them on Marketplace and OfferUp. Within 2 months, I was making more money flipping chairs than I had at my old job. That's when I decided to go all in. I took $5,000 from my savings, rented a small storage unit, and gave myself a deadline. If I couldn't replace my previous salary in 6 months, I'd go back to a real job. I called my new venture chairman as a joke at first, Chairman. Get it? It stuck. What started as a hustle became an obsession. I got to know the commercial real estate brokers who handled evictions and liquidations. I found a couple of guys on Craigslist with box trucks who could help me haul loads on short notice. I even paid a teenage neighbor to help with cleaning and photos. The margins were insane. I'd buy a Steelcase Leap chair for $60 and sell it for $400. Sometimes I'd grab a bundle deal, 20 chairs for $800, and flip them for over $5,000. My storage unit became 2, then 4, then a warehouse and an industrial park. But there were hiccups. Once, I bought an entire office's worth of furniture from a downtown space and didn't realize I needed a certificate of insurance, COI, to use the freight elevator. I had guys sitting in the parking garage waiting, and building security wouldn't let us move a thing. I had to scramble and beg a favor from a buddy who worked in construction. Cost me $500 just to get the damn form. Another time, a customer accused me of selling a broken chair and demanded a refund. I offered to swap it, but he blasted me on a neighborhood group instead. That was my first experience with how much a single bad review can hurt. After that, I started offering 14-day warranties and documenting everything with video proof before each sale. By year 1, Chairman had cleared just over $120,000 in profit. I wasn't just paying the bills, I was thriving. I hired my brother-in-law part-time to handle logistics, brought in a freelance designer to make a logo and spruce up our online presence. I was 33, divorced, and living in my sister's guest room when I accidentally started a business that would go on to make 7 figures. It started with a lie. My background? Nothing flashy. I wasn't a software engineer. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I'd spent my 20s bouncing between sales jobs, none of which lasted more than a year. When my marriage ended, I was broke and floating. My sister offered me a room for 3 months max, which became 9. One afternoon, I was scrolling LinkedIn while pretending to look for jobs, when I saw a post from a former coworker bragging about a killer pitch deck he'd just sent to investors. The deck was trash. Design was a mess, the story incoherent. And yet, the post had 100 likes and 2 VCs commenting, "Let's talk." Without thinking, I commented, "If you want your next deck to actually land, shoot me a message." He'd met me in 20 minutes. I didn't have a business. I wasn't a designer. But I'd worked in sales long enough to know how to tell a story. I stayed up all night watching pitch decks on YouTube, downloading templates, and tearing apart Sequoia's public pitch frameworks. The next morning, I told him my rate was $500 and I'd need 3 days. He paid through Venmo and sent over a Google document. I made the deck, sent it back, and didn't hear anything for a week. Then he emailed. This was 10x better than what we sent. Investor actually complimented it on the call. You doing this full time? I said yes. He forwarded me to 2 other founders. One of them was raising a pre-seed. That second deck netted her $400K in 3 weeks. She sent me $750 and called it a bargain. I went to GoDaddy, bought deckgenius.io for $12. I didn't even have a logo. Just a Google form with a Typeform Y vibe and a Stripe integration. I gave myself a month. 30 days to try and replace the $3000/month income one had when I worked my last job. I figured if I could land 5 clients at $600, I'd make it. By day 17, I had 11. Turns out, there were way more startup founders than I thought, and most of them couldn't tell a story to save their lives. They'd throw buzzwords into a blender and spit out 20 slides with zero cohesion. I cleaned it up, made it feel like a story, build a flow, problem, solution, market, moat, traction, ask. I didn't even use fancy design software. Just Google Slides. I reinvested every dollar. I paid a designer $300 to clean up my own pitch deck so I could pitch my service. I spent $100 a week on Reddit and indie hackers ads. I met people cold on Twitter. I commented on VC posts and asked dumb questions to get visibility. I slept 4 hours a night. My sister told me I needed to get a real job. But then, 2 months in, I made $11 for 100. She stopped asking. By month 4, I was doing around $15K/month. I brought on a contractor to handle overflow. He was a laid-off ed copywriter and better than me at half the cost. I raised my prices. One founder asked if I could do their sales deck for a B2B client. I said yes. That turned into 5 more referrals. Suddenly, we weren't just pitch decks. We were strategic storytelling for early-stage startups. It sounded made up. It kind of was. But it worked. I finally moved out of my sister's place and into a 1-bedroom with peeling cabinets but a door that locked from the inside. That first night, I slept with the window open and ordered the biggest Chinese takeout feast of my life. I didn't even finish half. I just wanted to know I could. 12 months in, we hit $400K in revenue. It was just me, 2 contractors, and a part-time designer I found on Upwork. I got invited to speak on a podcast for bootstrap founders. The host asked what our niche was. I said, we help non-technical founders raise money without sounding stupid. Crude, but it stuck. Year 2 got weird. A client in Miami who raised a $3M seed round offered to buy us. $1.1 million cash, 70% upfront. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I said no. Not because I was greedy, but because I didn't trust myself to build something else again. I needed to know if this was a fluke. Spoiler, it wasn't. We expanded into product one-pagers, investor updates, cold email campaigns. I learned what not to do. Don't overhire, don't overspend, don't try to be an agency when a boutique is enough. Our margins stayed healthy. We stayed small. Today, we're in year 4. Deck Genius did $1.3 million last year, 60% profit. I still work out of my apartment, though now it's a nicer one in Austin. I've helped 370-plus founders raise a combined $280 million. I keep a spreadsheet. I've seen startups explode, implode, ghost me after Series A, and send me Christmas gifts from Italy. I never raised money, never bought Facebook ads, never made a single TikTok. But I built something founders needed, and I knew how to talk to them in their own language. I still answer the intake forms personally. Sometimes I rewrite their problem slide in 30 seconds, and they call me a genius. I'm not. I just listen better than most people, and I care whether their idea makes it or not. Maybe that's the whole difference. I was the kind of person who always played it safe. Graduated with a business degree, got a job at a decent logistics firm, and spent the better part of my 20s tracking freight schedules and optimizing warehouse flows. Nothing glamorous, just reliable. Predictable. I thought I had things figured out until a delivery screw-up cost my company a 6-figure client, and I got thrown under the bus by my manager. 1 week later, I was unemployed, pissed, and sitting in a diner drinking cold coffee like a cliché. That was when I met Ravi. Ravi was the cook, the guy flipping burgers and managing the place solo at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. He noticed me coming in every day for 2 weeks and finally asked what my deal was. I told him. He laughed. Not in a mean way, but the kind of laugh that said, "Been there." Turned out he was a mechanical engineer who had been laid off 2 years prior. Instead of jumping back into the grind, he opened this diner with his uncle's help. He didn't love cooking, but he loved being in control of his life. Somewhere between that conversation and the grilled cheese I didn't finish, a switch flipped in my head. The next day, I went home and started sketching out an idea I'd been thinking about for years but never had the guts to explore: custom shipping solutions for small e-commerce brands. Everyone was obsessed with Amazon-level logistics, but small businesses were drowning in shipping costs and unreliable fulfillment. I had a bunch of contacts from my old job, and I knew the back end better than most people. Maybe I couldn't beat Amazon, but I could help the Davids fight Goliath. I registered the LLC the same week. Named it Packfleet. I had $12,000 saved up, and after rent and bills, I had about 6 months to make it work before I'd be delivering food or begging for interviews. The first hurdle was tech. I'm not a coder, and I couldn't afford a proper developer. So I did what most broke entrepreneurs do. I patched together a Frankenstein system using Zapier, Airtable, Shopify integrations, and lots of spreadsheets. My first pitch went out to 5 indie skincare brands I found on Instagram. One of them, Juniper and Sage, gave me a shot. I picked up their orders in my rusty Mazda, packed them in my living room, and shipped them through discounted FedEx labels I got via a third-party reseller. Every night, I hand-wrote thank you notes with the customer's name. It was absurdly time-consuming and completely unsustainable, but the brand loved it. Their founder, Maya, told 2 other business owners. One of them sold handmade candles and needed same-day fulfillment for a subscription box. I said yes before I even knew how I'd do it. By month 3, I was handling order fulfillment for 6 brands. My apartment looked like a UPS depot. I slept on the couch because the bed was covered in mailers and craft paper. But I was profitable, barely. I made enough to scrape by, and for the first time in years, I didn't dread Mondays. Then came the first real test, the holiday season. Black Friday to Christmas was a logistical bloodbath. I miscounted inventory, mislabeled packages, and once shipped an entire box to the wrong state. I cried in my car more times than I'd admit to anyone. But I learned fast. I got better. I hired a part-time helper, Sarah, a single mom who packed with the precision of a robot and the patience of a saint. By year 1, I moved into a 700-square-foot warehouse and bought 2 label printers that actually worked. We fulfilled 800 orders in a single day during December, and I thought we were unstoppable. Until Shopify changed its shipping API. Overnight, the cheap labels I'd been relying on were gone. Our costs jumped by 20%, and 3 clients threatened to leave. I spent 2 weeks negotiating with shipping aggregators and eventually brokered a deal that brought our rates down by 14%. Still not great, but enough to survive. That was the first time I realized that running a business was less about building and more about surviving constant sabotage, sometimes from the outside, sometimes from your own mistakes. By year 2, we had 30 clients and a 2,000-square-foot warehouse. I was paying myself a salary and even took a weekend off, just one, but it felt like a vacation to another planet. I hired Ravi to manage warehouse ops after his diner lease expired. The guy went from flipping burgers to designing efficient pick-and-pack systems that cut our labor time by a third. Then came COVID. At first, I thought it'd kill us. Brands paused orders, people stopped spending, and for 2 terrifying months, we had more refunds than shipments. But then the e-commerce wave hit. People couldn't go to stores, so they bought everything online. We were one of the few fulfillment companies small enough to onboard quickly but mature enough to handle scale. In 3 months, we tripled our volume. We took over 2 more warehouse units, hired 10 more people, got our first 6-figure contract. It felt like the big leagues. We weren't just a scrappy startup anymore. We were a real logistics company. I started waking up every morning at 5:30, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I felt like a king, until I almost lost everything. A former employee I had fired for stealing packages filed a bogus labor complaint. OSHA, IRS, and the Department of Labor all came knocking. Even though we had documentation, it took 8 months and $30,000 in legal fees to get everything dismissed. But the damage was done. 3 clients left during the chaos. I laid off 5 people. I lost 10 pounds and developed insomnia that still hasn't gone away. That period taught me the darkest truth about entrepreneurship. It's lonely as hell. No one cares how hard you're trying. No one's coming to save you. And when things go wrong, even your wins get questioned. But I didn't quit. I couldn't. Today, for years in, Packfleet ships for 84 brands across the country. We operate out of a 12,000 square foot facility. We've invested in automation. We even launched our own eco-friendly packaging line that's catching on fast. I've started mentoring new founders, partly to give back and partly because I know exactly how painful those early years are. I still drive by that diner sometimes. It's closed now. COVID killed it for good. But I think about Ravi and that burger and the way one offhand conversation rerouted my whole life. He saved me, and then I hired him, and together we built something people rely on. I don't think I'll ever stop being scared. Every month, there's a new fire to put out. But for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be, even if the floor is always shifting beneath me. If you're on the edge, wondering whether to jump, here's what I'll say: you'll never feel ready. Do it anyway. I was 28 when I walked away from a 6-figure job at a Fortune 500 company to start a business I knew nothing about: laundromats. It started with a panic attack. I was sitting in my 5th Zoom call of the day, a spreadsheet open on one screen, Slack buzzing like a mosquito on the other. I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe. Not metaphorically. I legit stood up and stumbled to the bathroom thinking I was having a heart attack. Turned out, just years of burnout hitting a tipping point. So I quit. Just like that. I told my boss I needed to take a break. He tried to throw a sabbatical at me. More stock, a leadership track. I didn't even consider it. I had saved up around $110K, mostly from bonuses and living modestly. I had no clue what I was going to do next. My first idea was to start a tech consulting business. That flopped fast. Every pitch I made felt hollow. I didn't believe in it. I wanted something real, tangible. I wanted to see customers, talk to people, fix things with my hands. Weird desire for a guy with a computer science degree and a decade of cloud architecture under his belt. I stumbled on the idea of laundromats from a podcast. The guest said something like, "People will always need clean clothes." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started researching profit margins, locations, water bills, used equipment. I even started hanging out in random laundromats after work, talking to the owners like some kind of creep. One owner, Sheila, was in her late 60s. She had owned her laundromat in Queens for 22 years. She told me it basically ran itself now. Said the only real problem was that her son didn't want to take over. That stuck with me. 2 months later, I made her an offer $85,000 for the whole thing. She laughed. I came back with $120,000. We negotiated. Settled at $138,000, all in. I borrowed $50,000 from my cousin at 7% and used the rest of my savings. That laundromat became mine. It was a dump. I mean it. One washer was duct taped shut. There was a leak under the change machine that had turned the tile black. The hours were weird, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., and half the machines only took quarters. But I was obsessed. I showed up at 7 a.m. every day. Cleaned. Talked to the customers. Replaced machines piece by piece from auctions and Craigslist. I created punch cards to encourage repeat customers. Repainted the walls myself. Installed a smart security system that sent alerts to my phone. Made the place 24/7. Added Apple Pay and a loyalty app. All told, I sank another $30,000 in over 6 months. The weirdest part? I loved it. I hadn't felt that kind of energy in years. 6 months in, the laundromat was making around $6,000/month in profit. Not massive, but for someone used to working 70-hour weeks for a company he hated, it felt like freedom. Then I got ambitious. I started scouting again. Found a struggling place in Jersey with a terrible lease, but brand new equipment. Owner was desperate. I got it for $110,000 and renegotiated the lease with a 15% rent reduction if I did the maintenance myself. I now had 2 laundromats. At this point, I was working 16-hour days, split between both locations. I had one part-time employee, Maria, a single mom who ran the night shifts. I trusted her so much I made her a manager and gave her a small profit share. She treated the place like her own. The third laundromat came 9 months later. Then the fourth. Then I stopped buying. I had 4 shops, each grossing between $10K and $20K monthly. Profit margins sat around 25 to 30%. I was making more than I ever did at my tech job. More importantly, I felt whole again. That was 2 years ago. Now I have a small team. 4 full-time staff, 2 part-time, and 1 maintenance guy who works across all locations. I still visit every shop once a week. I bring donuts, chat with the regulars, make small tweaks. I started offering a wash and fold subscription service that's growing like crazy among busy professionals and students. But here's the twist nobody expects. I turned it all into software. While running these laundromats, I started building a back-end tool for tracking coin revenue, machine uptime, foot traffic, water usage, and customer engagement. Just for myself, at first. Then Maria's cousin, who ran a laundromat across town, asked if she could use it. Then 3 others. Today, that tool, called SpinLogic, is a SaaS platform with over 50 paying customers. I charge $99 per location, with some larger operators paying for enterprise features. It doesn't sound huge, but the recurring revenue adds up. The irony? I'm finally back in tech, but this time it's on my terms. I use my laundromats as my lab. When something works there, I build it into the platform. No venture capital, no slide decks, no all-hands meetings. Just me, some clean clothes, and a hell of a lot of quarters. And yeah, sometimes I miss the free snacks at my old job. But every time I walk into one of my shops and see a single mom folding clothes at midnight so she can get her kids ready for school, or a college student studying in the corner while their clothes dry, I remember why I left. It wasn't just about quitting a job. It was about starting a life. I never thought selling bath bombs would lead to this level of insanity. I'm 32 now, but this all started 6 years ago. Back then, I was broke, jobless after a failed attempt at teaching abroad, and living in my sister's basement in Toledo, Ohio. I had a degree in environmental science, a mountain of student debt, and absolutely zero business background. The bath bombs came in as a joke. My sister had this habit of spending $7 a pop on the Lush ones and complaining every time about how they were too crumbly or smelled like a hippie commune. One day, while doom-scrolling on YouTube, I came across a video titled something like How I Made $10K/month selling bath bombs. I scoffed. Then I watched it. Twice. I had $138 to my name and a credit card I had been ignoring for 9 months. So naturally, I used both. Bought some baking soda, citric acid, essential oils, molds, and food coloring. Made my first batch in the kitchen. They were lumpy and smelled like a mix of pine and weird regret. But they fizzed, and I was obsessed. I called my new company Moss Creek Naturals because it sounded earthy and artisanal. My first sale was to a lady at a church flea market who only bought one because I reminded her of her nephew. She paid me $3 and told me I looked tired. I started selling them on Etsy, then local farmers markets. Every weekend, I packed a folding table into my sister's beat-up Subaru and sat under a tarp while people asked me questions like, "Are these edible?" And "Do you have one that smells like whiskey?" Year 1 was a grind. I cleared maybe $2,000 total after expenses. But I kept getting return customers. A yoga instructor named Dana bought from me every other week and eventually asked if I could make custom scents. I said yes, Googled how, and made my first custom batch: lavender, eucalyptus, and vetiver. That combo became my bestseller. In year 2, I took a $5,000 loan from a friend I met at a community entrepreneurship class. He believed in what I was doing more than I did. I used that to move out of my sister's place and into a studio apartment with enough space for a drying rack and a wall of raw ingredients. I also launched my own Shopify store. That's when things started to turn. An Instagram post featuring my bath bombs in rainbow colors got picked up by a lifestyle influencer. Within 3 days, I had 900 orders. I fulfilled 146 before I completely ran out of stock, packaging, and will to live. I refunded half, emailed everyone personally, and included free extras in the ones I shipped late. I thought that fiasco would ruin me. Instead, my customer base tripled. By the end of year 3, Moss Creek Naturals had cleared $78,000 in revenue. I quit my part-time job at a garden center and hired my first part-time employee. A local high school senior named Ty who was smarter than me in every way and had no interest in bath bombs, just in operations. He helped me streamline everything from inventory to shipping logistics. He even built me a better website for free because he wanted to practice. We moved into a shared commercial kitchen space. At that point, I was doing custom wholesale orders for bridal boutiques, spas, and a few quirky bookstores that loved the idea of literary-themed bath bombs. Pride and Peppermint, anyone? Then came the TV deal. A producer from a local PBS segment on sustainable small businesses reached out. They did a 5-minute spot on us, featuring me mixing a batch and talking about the importance of eco-friendly packaging. The day it aired, our website crashed from traffic. That week, we did $15,000 in sales. But your 4 almost killed me. Scaling is a beast. People love the word growth until you're knee-deep in tax issues, employee drama, and supply chain meltdowns. My supplier for citric acid doubled their prices with 1 week's notice. Ty quit to go to MIT. I cried and then wrote him a letter of recommendation that could have gotten a rock into Harvard. A batch of 4,000 units molded because of improper drying and wiped out 70% of our inventory. I sat on the floor of our production room at 2 a.m., staring at a trash bin full of what should have been our Mother's Day collection, and thought, maybe I'm done. But I wasn't. I got a short-term bridge loan, took a brutal inventory audit, hired 2 production assistants, moved to a climate-controlled facility. I learned. Fast. Year 5, we hit our first 6-figure revenue year. We expanded to candles and salt soaks. I did a pop-up shop in Chicago that sold out in 48 hours. Target reached out about a potential collaboration, didn't pan out. But still, I was invited to speak at a sustainability panel in Portland and managed to sound like I knew what I was talking about. Now in year 6, we're approaching $450K in annual revenue. We're profitable. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. That sounds ridiculous coming from someone who now owns a logistics tech company with 87 employees and a 7-figure revenue stream. But 5 years ago, I was a mid-level project manager for a construction firm in Arizona. I had a company laptop, a predictable routine, and health insurance. Life was okay, even if uninspiring. My dad used to say I was born allergic to risk. He was the hustler type, bought and sold cars, owned a laundromat for a while, then went into flipping houses until the 2008 crash took most of his net worth. I admired his drive, but not the chaos. I swore I'd never live like that. What changed? A lost pallet of ceramic toilets. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I was in the middle of planning a family trip to Flagstaff for the weekend. A supplier had sent us 5 pallets of high-end toilets for a luxury condo project in Scottsdale. 4 arrived. 1 was AWOL, and no one knew where it was. Not the driver, not the warehouse, not the supplier. Just poof. Gone. We were on a tight schedule and the delay cost us $11,000 in penalties. That night, still fuming, I sat at my laptop and thought, how the hell is it 2020 and we can track an Amazon package of cat food in real time, but not a commercial toilet pallet worth $5,000? I went down a rabbit hole. Over the next 3 weeks, I read logistics blogs, watched webinars, and joined a few Reddit communities. I discovered something shocking. Many small and mid-sized logistics companies were still running on spreadsheets and whiteboards. I started talking to suppliers and delivery firms we worked with. A few were trying to digitize, but most couldn't afford enterprise software like Oracle or SAP. That's when the idea clicked. What if there was a simple, affordable platform that let small logistics companies track and manage deliveries, integrate GPS data from drivers' phones, and provide real-time status updates to their clients? I called it Ghost Route. The name came from that missing toilet pallet, like a ghost route that vanished into thin air. For months, it was just an idea I tinkered with in my off hours. I used no-code tools to create a prototype, then paid a freelance developer from Ukraine to build a working MVP. I spent $8,500 from savings. My wife was supportive, but cautious. She asked me every week, "Are you sure this isn't your midlife crisis?" I told her if it was, at least I wasn't buying a motorcycle. By month 6, we had a barely functioning app, a basic website, and 3 beta users I found by cold emailing 82 small logistics companies across the Southwest. 2 never replied again. 1 gave feedback. 1 stayed. That company, Mesa Valley Freight, ended up becoming our first paying client. They agreed to pay $300/month if we could add a feature that let drivers upload proof of delivery photos from their phones. My developer and I built it in 2 weeks. That client referred us to 2 others. I started getting excited. At the 9-month mark, I did something that still feels like jumping out of a plane. I quit my job. We had $900 in monthly revenue, $4,000 left in savings, and no funding. But I couldn't do both jobs anymore, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. The next year was brutal. I worked from a fold-out desk in our guest bedroom, pitched clients during the day, tested code at night, and handled support tickets 24/7. My developer was still part-time, but I brought on another freelance UX designer. I made every dollar stretch. When I couldn't afford CRM software, I built my own system in Airtable. I learned how to run Facebook and Google ads. I wrote blog posts pretending to be a team of 5 when it was just me and my cat. We hit $10,000 MRR after 13 months. That's when I applied to a regional accelerator program. I didn't think we'd get in, but we did. I moved to Austin for 3 months while my wife stayed in Arizona. The program helped us clean up our pitch, got us in front of angel investors, and taught me that my solution needed serious refinement. We rebuilt the app from scratch with a new dev team I hired through the program. That's also when I learned the worst truth about entrepreneurship. Building the product is 20% of the work. Selling it is the rest. I hated sales. Still kind of do. But I learned to treat it like project management, break down the pipeline, track leads, follow up, log calls. Eventually, I got better. We landed a 25-location logistics firm that brought in $800/month. Then another. By year 3, we had 40 clients and a team of 9. Then COVID hit. Oddly enough, it helped us. While major supply chains were melting down, small logistics companies exploded in demand and needed digital tools to manage it. We added features like contactless delivery logging, automated temperature checks for drivers, and integrations with warehouse inventory systems. Our revenue doubled. At the same time, venture capital started sniffing around. I took 2 seed meetings and walked out of both. They wanted too much equity and too fast a timeline. I decided to bootstrap. I wanted to grow on our terms. By year 4, we hit $1.2 million ARR. I hired a COO, someone way better at operations than I ever was. Our team now has people in 5 states. I stopped writing code, stopped taking every support call, and finally took my first 2-week vacation in 5 years. Here's the part no one talks about. Success is boring. Not in a bad way. But the chaos that defined my early days is gone. Now it's org charts, hiring plans, compliance audits, customer NPS tracking. It's spreadsheets and Zoom meetings. The thrill is different. Calmer. And that's okay. I used to chase the high of solving every crisis. Now I chase stability for my team, my clients, and my family. Funny thing, my dad thinks I've become one of the suits. But last Christmas, after 1 too many beers, he said something that stuck with me. You didn't inherit my fire, but you built your own stove. I don't know what's next. We've been approached for acquisition twice. I said no both times. I'm not done yet. But sometimes I think back to that missing pallet of toilets and I laugh. That stupid delivery screw-up changed my entire life. It was a warm summer day in 2014 when I decided to take the plunge. I was sitting at my desk in a corporate job that paid well, offered decent benefits, and a structured routine that many would envy. But it wasn't my dream. It wasn't what I had envisioned for myself when I first entered the workforce a decade earlier. At the time, I was working as a project manager for a mid-sized tech company, helping to roll out software solutions for clients in various industries. The job was stable, but I was suffocated by the predictability of it all. It felt like I was just another cog in the machine, and the passion that once burned bright in me was now reduced to a flicker. I had an idea, a vision, and I knew it was time to pursue it. My friends and family had been telling me for years that I should start my own business. You've got the skills, they'd say. You've got the mindset. But I was always too scared to take the leap. Every time I thought about it, doubts would cloud my mind. What if I failed? What if I lost everything? What if I didn't have what it took? But this day was different. As I sat in my cramped office, sipping lukewarm coffee, I realized something fundamental. The fear of failure wasn't as daunting as the regret of never trying. So, I did what I had to do. I made a decision. I walked into my manager's office, handed in my resignation letter, and left that comfortable job behind. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew where I wanted to start. I had always been passionate about e-commerce and digital marketing. In the past few years, I had dabbled in online stores, selling products on platforms like Etsy and eBay. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me a taste of what it felt like to build something from the ground up. I took a few months off to reflect and plan. I spent countless hours researching market trends, reading articles about successful entrepreneurs, and studying the best practices in the e-commerce world. One thing became clear: dropshipping was the way to go. I didn't have the capital to invest in inventory upfront, and dropshipping offered a low-risk model. I could create an online store, partner with suppliers, and have products shipped directly to customers without ever touching the physical goods. I launched my first dropshipping store in early 2015. I spent weeks obsessing over every detail, from the logo design to the website layout to the product descriptions. I selected a niche I was passionate about: eco-friendly products. I believed in sustainability and saw an opportunity to capitalize on the growing interest in environmentally conscious living. My website was live, and I had spent my last savings to get everything up and running. I remember hitting publish on my website and feeling both exhilarated and terrified. I had no idea whether anyone would even visit, let alone buy anything. My marketing strategy was basic: social media ads, a few Instagram influencers, and some SEO work. The first month passed, and I had made exactly $0. I was devastated. I thought I had done everything right, but nothing seemed to work. But I wasn't ready to quit. I spent the next few months tweaking my ads, experimenting with different product offerings, and adjusting my pricing strategy. I started to see some small wins. A sale here, a sale there. It wasn't much, but it was progress. I took those tiny victories and used them as motivation to keep pushing forward. By the end of 2015, I had made my first $10,000 in sales. It wasn't enough to retire or buy a new car, but it was enough to prove to myself that this could work. I reinvested every penny into the business, refining my website, hiring a part-time virtual assistant, and investing in paid ads. The next big breakthrough came in 2016 when I discovered Facebook ads. I had been running ads on Google and Instagram, but the return on investment was minimal. Facebook ads, however, were a game changer. I learned how to target my audience precisely, optimize my ad spend, and scale my campaigns. I went from making a few $100s a month to hitting $10,000 in sales within a week. It felt like the floodgates had opened. By mid-2017, my dropshipping business was generating six figures in revenue. I had hired a small team to help with customer service, fulfillment, and social media management. My days were filled with strategy meetings, analytics reviews, and emails. I was living the entrepreneurial dream. But with success came new challenges. I started to feel overwhelmed. My business was growing faster than I could keep up with. I had to learn how to delegate, how to manage a team, and how to scale without losing quality or customer satisfaction. The pressure was immense. There were days when I would lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Was I making the right decisions? Was I sacrificing too much? In 2018, I decided to diversify my income streams. I didn't want to rely solely on dropshipping. I had seen too many businesses in the space that thrived one day and collapsed the next. I began experimenting with creating my own branded products, working with manufacturers directly. It was a slow process, and the upfront costs were higher, but it paid off in the long run. My profit margins increased, and I had more control over my supply chain. I also started mentoring other entrepreneurs who were interested in starting their own online businesses. I launched an online course, sharing everything I had learned over the past few years. It was a way to give back and help others avoid the mistakes I had made. By 2019, I had built a seven-figure business. I was able to hire a full-time team, invest in better systems, and take a step back from the day-to-day operations. I could finally breathe. It wasn't easy, and there were many sleepless nights, but the feeling of watching something I had created from scratch become a thriving business was indescribable. Fast forward to today, and I'm living a life I could have only dreamed of back when I was stuck in that corporate job. I travel frequently, speak at industry events, and continue to grow my business. I still face challenges, and not every day is perfect, but I'm doing what I love. And it all started with a decision to take a risk, to step outside my comfort zone, and to believe in myself. Looking back, I realized that it wasn't just the technical knowledge or the strategies that made the difference. It was the mindset, the willingness to learn, adapt, and persist. Entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you're willing to put in the work, take the risks, and embrace the failures along the way, you can build something extraordinary. I did. And so can you. I had never planned on being an entrepreneur. In fact, growing up, I didn't even know what the term meant. I was always the kid who thought success was defined by a stable job and a 9-to-5 routine. But in hindsight, I realized my journey to entrepreneurship was driven by necessity, a lot of stubbornness, and a healthy dose of imposter syndrome. This is the story of how a guy who had no business background ended up building a company from nothing. It all started during my final year in college. I was studying communications with no clear idea of what I wanted to do after graduation. My plan had always been to follow the traditional route, get a job in marketing, pay my dues, work my way up, and eventually settle down. But life, as it often does, had other plans. I was interning at a small digital marketing agency, doing everything from social media management to writing blogs and content for clients. The agency was struggling. The work was tiring, and my boss, a well-meaning but overworked entrepreneur, was barely hanging on. It was clear to me that the agency was struggling to keep up with the demands of clients, and it seemed like there were constant fires to put out. One day, my boss pulled me aside and told me the news. The agency was shutting down. I wasn't shocked. The signs had been there. But what happened next took me by surprise. My boss offered me a deal. Look, you've been here a while, and you know the business. If you're interested, you could take over some of the accounts, and we can figure out a way for you to continue this agency in your own way. I'll admit, my first thought was, no way. I had no desire to run a business, especially one that was already failing. But something about the idea stayed with me. I was at a crossroads. I didn't want to work for someone else for the rest of my life, and I also didn't have many opportunities lined up. The next few days were spent thinking about what I wanted from my life. And then, in the middle of a random Tuesday, it hit me, why not give it a shot? I called my boss back and said, let's do it. The decision was made. I started working on the new agency while still attending school. I had no money to start a business, and the thought of taking on debt terrified me. So, I kept things lean. I worked out of my tiny apartment, using my savings to cover the basic costs like software subscriptions, website hosting, and the occasional pizza to fuel my late-night work sessions. I didn't even pay myself for the first few months. The money I made from the few clients I had went straight back into the business. The first challenge was finding new clients. The previous agency's reputation wasn't stellar, and I knew I had to rebrand if I wanted to succeed. I had no formal marketing background, but I quickly learned that you don't need to know everything in order to figure things out. I spent hours reading blogs, watching YouTube videos, and listening to podcasts about digital marketing. I taught myself how to build a website, create social media campaigns, and even do SEO. But that's when the first big problem hit: imposter syndrome. I was constantly questioning whether I was good enough. What if clients found out I didn't really know what I was doing? What if I failed? There were countless nights when I thought about giving up and going back to a real job. But somehow, I managed to keep pushing forward, telling myself that I could always learn more and get better. The breakthrough came when I landed my first big client, a local restaurant chain that had just opened a new location. They wanted help with their online marketing, and after a lot of hard work and a pitch that I barely pulled together, I closed the deal. I was ecstatic, but also completely terrified. I had no idea how to scale up or handle a client of this size. But there was no turning back now. I gave everything I had to this client, working long hours and pulling all-nighters. Slowly but surely, the results began to show. Their social media engagement skyrocketed, and their online orders increased significantly. They were thrilled with the work, and that referral led to another client and another and another. I was finally starting to see some momentum. But running a business wasn't just about client work. It was about managing a team, handling finances, and making sure the business stayed afloat. I quickly realized that running a business was like juggling a million different things at once. I needed to hire people, but I had no idea what I was doing in terms of managing a team. I started with just one employee, a friend from college who had some experience in marketing. It was a huge learning curve, and there were plenty of mistakes along the way. I hired the wrong people, mismanaged cash flow, and even let a few clients slip through the cracks. The mistakes were painful, But they were also lessons. By the time I graduated, the business had grown enough that I could consider it my full-time job. I had a small team, a handful of clients, and a steady stream of income. But the pressure was mounting. I had to deal with things like taxes, legal stuff, and contracts, all things I had never imagined I'd need to know. There were moments when I wanted to walk away and take the easy route, but I kept reminding myself of how far I'd come. I had built something from scratch, and I wasn't about to let it all fall apart now. Fast forward 5 years, and I'm still running that same agency. It hasn't been easy. There have been moments of doubt, stress, and even times when I thought I'd lose everything. But looking back, I realized that all those hard times were just part of the journey. I've had to learn the hard way about leadership, marketing, and what it really takes to run a business. But the most important lesson I've learned is that success doesn't come from avoiding failure. It comes from getting back up every time you fall. Today, the agency has expanded, and I've added new services like web development and graphic design. We've worked with clients in nearly every industry, from tech startups to local shops to national brands. The company has grown beyond what I could have imagined when I first started, and though there are still plenty of challenges ahead, I wouldn't change a thing. I'm not one of those entrepreneurs who talks about overnight success. My journey has been full of small wins, big mistakes, and everything in between. But the one thing I can say for sure is that it was worth it. Starting a business isn't easy, but if you have the passion, the grit, and the willingness to learn from your mistakes, you can make it happen. If you're thinking about starting your own business, here's my advice. Start small, keep learning, and don't be afraid to fail. Because if you keep going, you might just end up surprising yourself. The road isn't always straight, but the destination is worth it. It was 2014, and I was living in a cramped apartment in a small town in Ohio. I had a steady job working as a marketing assistant for a small tech firm, but I always felt like I was destined for something more. I had an itch I couldn't scratch, and it seemed like no matter how hard I worked, I was never going to break free from the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. There had to be more to life than this. I remember the day it all started. I was sitting at my desk, mindlessly scrolling through my phone during my lunch break when I stumbled upon a video of someone explaining how they made money by reselling limited edition sneakers. I thought, that's it. That's my ticket out. I had always been a fan of sneakers. Growing up, I collected every pair of Jordans I could get my hands on, but I never considered the possibility that I could turn that passion into a business. I spent the next few days obsessively researching the sneaker resale market. I read every article, watched every YouTube video, and joined several online forums. The more I learned, the more excited I became. People were making thousands of dollars reselling shoes for just a few hours of work each week. It seemed almost too good to be true, but I wasn't naive. I knew that starting a business wasn't going to be easy. I also knew I didn't have the capital to buy hundreds of pairs of sneakers up front. I had maybe $500 saved up, and that wasn't nearly enough to compete with the bigger players in the market. So, I started small. I began by focusing on smaller, more affordable releases, hoping to build up some credibility before diving into the big leagues. The first pair I bought was a limited edition Nike Air Max. It wasn't a huge release, but I knew there was a small group of people who would pay a premium for it. I bought it for $120 and listed it on eBay for $200. The shoe sold within hours, and I made a quick $80 profit. I couldn't believe it. I was hooked. That one sale sparked something inside me. I realized that with enough dedication and strategy, I could turn this into something bigger. From there, I started refining my process. I began following sneaker release calendars and using bots to secure pairs on release days. It was still a gamble, but I quickly learned which brands and models were most likely to sell out. I also started using social media platforms like Instagram and Twitter to engage with the sneakerhead community, which helped me build a reputation. I wasn't just another reseller. I was someone who understood the culture and had a passion for the shoes. Over the next few months, I reinvested my profits into more inventory. My small $500 had turned into $10,000, and I was starting to think bigger. But I still had a day job, and it was becoming harder to juggle both. I was working 40 hours a week at the tech firm, then coming home to pack and ship shoes at night. I would stay up until 3 or 4 a.m., trying to get everything ready for the next day. My friends thought I was crazy, but I didn't care. I knew that this was my chance to break out of the cycle. In 2015, I decided to quit my job and go all in on my reselling business. It was a terrifying decision, But deep down, I knew it was the right move. I had learned everything I could from online resources, but I needed to see the bigger picture. I needed to scale up, and I couldn't do that while working a 9-to-5 job. The first few months of full-time reselling were brutal. The market had become more competitive, and sneaker releases were becoming harder to secure. I had to adapt quickly, using new tactics and expanding into other areas of the footwear market. I began focusing on rare, vintage sneakers and started networking with other resellers to secure better deals. I also hired a few part-time employees to help me with packing and shipping, which allowed me to focus more on finding profitable inventory. But I wasn't just a reseller anymore. I was building a brand. I created a website where I could sell directly to customers and started using email marketing to build a loyal customer base. I also started offering exclusive access to limited edition shoes for people who signed up for my newsletter. It wasn't just about selling shoes, it was about creating a community of people who shared the same passion for sneakers that I did. By 2017, my business had exploded. I was making 6 figures a year, and my brand was gaining recognition in the sneaker community. I was traveling to sneaker conventions, meeting with manufacturers, and learning about the supply chain. I had gone from a guy in a small apartment with a $1,500 investment to a legitimate entrepreneur running a successful business. But as the business grew, so did the challenges. The sneaker resale market was changing. More and more resellers were entering the space, and the margins were shrinking. The release of new sneakers was becoming less predictable, and bots were making it harder to secure the most popular models. I had to find new ways to stay ahead of the competition. That's when I pivoted. I started offering services to other resellers. I created a subscription-based platform that provided detailed market analysis, release calendars, and insider tips. I also began working directly with sneaker brands to offer early access to exclusive products. My business was no longer just about reselling. It was about providing value to other people in the sneaker community. Today, my business is not just about selling sneakers. It's a full-scale operation with multiple revenue streams, including online courses for aspiring resellers, a sneaker boutique, and even a partnership with a major sneaker brand. I still look back on those early days in Ohio with gratitude. Without that $1,500 investment and the willingness to take a risk, I would never have gotten here. I've learned so much along the way. The most important lesson? The value of persistence. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of times when I felt like quitting. But the key is to never give up, to adapt when things get tough, and to always stay true to your passion. If I can do it, anyone can. But it takes hard work, a lot of sacrifice, and the belief that you can turn your dreams into reality. So, if you're sitting there reading this, wondering if you can make it as an entrepreneur, just go for it. Take the leap. The worst thing that can happen is you fail, but you'll learn more from failure than you ever will from playing it safe. That's how you build something that lasts. And trust me, the view from the top is worth every second of the climb. I've always considered myself an ordinary person. No big connections, no fancy education, just a kid from a small town with big dreams. Growing up, I watched my parents work tirelessly to make ends meet. My mom worked as a nurse, my dad as a mechanic. They both had long hours and not much to show for it besides the satisfaction of keeping us fed and clothed. They often talked about how much they wished they had more time, and that struck a chord with me. But I never really understood what that meant until I got older. After high school, I went to college, unsure of what I wanted to do. I ended up with a degree in business administration, largely because it seemed like a safe choice. I wasn't passionate about it, but at least it seemed practical. I worked a few part-time jobs to get by, always trying to save a little for the future. As I moved through my 20s, the pressure to figure things out grew heavier. Most of my friends were securing steady jobs and moving into apartments with a real paycheck. I, on the other hand, was jumping from one temp job to another, still unsure of what I really wanted to do. I had a ton of ideas, but nothing that felt solid enough to act on. One day, I had a conversation with an older friend of mine, someone who'd built a small but successful online business. He told me something that stuck with me. It's not about having the best idea. It's about the ability to execute and adapt. That statement was like a light bulb moment for me. I realized that I didn't need to wait for the perfect idea. I just needed to start doing something. Anything. I spent a few months researching online businesses, trying to figure out what would make the most sense for me. After a lot of trial and error, I finally settled on dropshipping. It seemed like an accessible way to get into e-commerce without a huge upfront cost. I threw myself into it, reading every article, watching every YouTube video, and joining all the relevant Facebook groups. It felt like I was constantly in learning mode, but I loved it. I felt like I was building something from scratch. I started my first store selling phone accessories. The niche seemed simple enough. Everyone has a phone, so why not sell accessories for them? But my store flopped. I didn't do enough market research. I set up a poorly designed website, and I didn't invest in the right marketing. It was a disaster. I lost a few $100s, which felt like a lot to me at the time. But I didn't let it stop me. I knew I had to learn from my mistakes and keep going. Over the next year, I experimented with different products and store concepts. I tried selling fitness equipment, beauty products, and even gadgets for pets. Each time, I refined my strategy, adjusted my approach, and failed forward. At some point, I realized that I was putting in more time and effort into these businesses than I was at my day job. I was waking up at 6 a.m. to work on my store before heading to my 9 to 5, and then staying up late, managing orders and customer service. But it was all worth it. The growth was slow, but I was seeing results. Finally, about 18 months in, I hit my first big sale. A customer bought over $1,000 worth of items from my store. It was a moment I'll never forget. I couldn't believe it. It felt like all the hard work had finally paid off. But even then, I knew I still had a long way to go. I used the profits from that sale to reinvest in my business, refining my marketing strategy and improving my website. I also reached out to suppliers, negotiated better deals, and focused on scaling up. By the time I was 25, I was making enough from my online business to quit my day job. I remember sitting at my desk, writing my resignation letter, and feeling a mix of excitement and fear. It was the scariest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the most liberating. No more clocking in and out. No more answering to a boss. It was my business now, and it was time to give it my all. Quitting my job wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. I faced new challenges every day. There were times when I felt like I was in over my head, and the doubts would creep in. Was this all a fluke? Was I just one bad decision away from crashing and burning? But every time I encountered an obstacle, I reminded myself of why I started. I had something to prove, not just to others, but to myself. I wanted to build something that lasted. I wanted to create a business that could provide me with the time and freedom my parents never had. Fast forward a few years, and my business is no longer a side hustle. It's a fully fledged e-commerce operation with a team of 5 people working with me. We've expanded into different product categories, and I'm proud to say we've served thousands of customers. But even with the success, I've realized that there's always room for growth. The market is constantly shifting, and I have to keep adapting. Looking back, I realized that my entrepreneurial journey was never a straight path. There were a lot of bumps, detours, and failures along the way. But every setback taught me something new. It taught me to be patient, to embrace failure as part of the process, and to never stop learning. I've also learned the importance of taking care of my mental health, finding balance, and not letting the pressure of success consume me. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for everything to be lined up perfectly. The most successful entrepreneurs I know didn't start with a perfect plan. They started with a willingness to try and a determination to keep going when things got tough. Take the leap, learn from your mistakes, and keep improving. And most importantly, trust the process. I'm far from where I want to be, but I'm proud of the journey I've had so far. I'm not an expert, and I'm still learning every day. But I've come a long way from the guy who didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. Now, I'm building something I'm passionate about, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I started my journey into entrepreneurship back in 2015, at a time when I had no idea what I was doing. To be honest, I didn't even know the basics of business, but I had one thing that I believed would get me through: determination. At the time, I was working a dead-end job in retail, barely scraping by. The 9 to 5 grind was wearing me down, and I started getting that itch. You know, the one where you can't shake the feeling that there's something more you're meant to do with your life. I remember being on my lunch break one day, scrolling through my phone, when I came across a post about someone who built a successful online store from scratch. They didn't have a ton of experience, just a good idea, a willingness to work hard, and the drive to learn. That's when it clicked for me. I could do this. I didn't have much in the way of savings. In fact, I had about $500 in my bank account at the time, but I was tired of waiting for the right moment to take a leap. My thought was simple: if it failed, I could always go back to working retail. But what if it worked? What if I could build something meaningful? After a bit of research, I decided to start an online store, selling niche products that I was passionate about, eco-friendly, sustainable goods. I spent a few weeks learning about dropshipping, Shopify, and how to create a website. Looking back, the website I made was ugly as sin, but it was functional, and that was all I needed at the time. The first couple of months were brutal. I spent hours learning about SEO, running Facebook ads, and trying to get the word out. Sales trickled in, but I had no idea how to scale. I was doing everything myself, handling customer service, managing inventory, or the lack of it, and trying to maintain some semblance of a personal life. I remember staying up late every night reading about marketing strategies, only to wake up at 6 a.m. and head to my retail job. It was exhausting, but I was determined to make it work. The breakthrough came when I stumbled across a podcast that changed everything for me. It was an episode featuring an entrepreneur who had turned a small e-commerce store into a million-dollar business by focusing on influencer marketing. I had heard of influencer marketing before, but I had never really considered it as a serious strategy. After that episode, I decided to take a chance and reach out to a few micro-influencers in the sustainable living space. At first, I got nothing but silence. No responses. I almost gave up, but then I thought, what do I have to lose? So, I kept reaching out. Eventually, one influencer with about 50K followers responded. She was interested in collaborating, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. We agreed on a deal where she would promote my products on her Instagram account in exchange for free samples. I'll never forget the moment I saw her first post. The flood of comments and new followers was overwhelming. My phone kept buzzing with notifications, and for the first time, I felt like things were actually happening. That post led to my first real sales surge, and it was like a domino effect. As more influencers shared my products, my brand began to grow. The sales started rolling in, and I felt like I had finally hit the right note. Fast forward to 2017, and I was able to quit my retail job. My online store was making enough money to support me full-time, but it wasn't just the financial freedom that excited me, it was the freedom to create. I was able to design new products, build a team, and start making a real impact in the space I was passionate about. The store wasn't just a side hustle anymore, it was a legitimate business. But, as with any entrepreneurial journey, things weren't always smooth sailing. In 2018, I hit a major setback. One of my largest suppliers suddenly went out of business, leaving me scrambling to find new products to sell. It felt like the world was crashing down on me. I had customers waiting on orders, and I didn't have a reliable source for inventory anymore. For a while, I didn't know what to do. It took a lot of late nights and stress-filled phone calls, but I eventually found a new supplier that offered even better products at a competitive price. That setback became a turning point. It taught me how to adapt and be resilient. If I had given up, I would have lost everything, but instead, I found a way to pivot and keep moving forward. By 2019, my store was bringing in 6 figures annually, and I was able to hire a small team. I had a customer service manager, a content creator, and a fulfillment assistant who helped me manage orders. It was a dream come true, but it also came with a whole new set of challenges. Managing a team, making sure everything ran smoothly, and maintaining quality control were all new skills I had to learn on the fly. There were days when I felt overwhelmed and like I was barely keeping my head above water, but I kept pushing forward. Then, in 2020, the pandemic hit. The world shut down, and everything changed. For many businesses, this was a disaster, but for me, it was a turning point. As people became more aware of the importance of sustainability, my brand's focus on eco-friendly products started to resonate even more with customers. Sales surged, and the increased demand led me to scale even faster than I had ever anticipated. By 2021, my store was generating 7 figures annually, and I was able to expand into new product lines and even open a physical storefront. My brand had gone from a small side hustle to a thriving business with a loyal customer base. But the journey wasn't over. Every day was still a challenge, and every new milestone required me to push myself further. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned along the way. Entrepreneurship isn't about getting everything right from the start. It's about adapting, learning, and being willing to fail forward. I've made plenty of mistakes, from investing in the wrong marketing strategies to misjudging inventory orders. But each mistake has taught me something invaluable. Today, I'm grateful for the challenges I've faced. I'm proud of how far my business has come, but I'm also keenly aware that the journey is ongoing. There will always be new obstacles, new risks, and new opportunities. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. It's not a destination. It's a never-ending process of growth and reinvention. I still remember the days when I was working at that retail job, dreaming of something more. It feels surreal that I'm now living the life I once imagined. But at the same time, I know that I could never have gotten here without taking risks, learning from mistakes, and never giving up. So, for anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple. Start where you are, with what you have, and keep moving forward, no matter how hard it gets. You might just surprise yourself with what you can achieve. I started my journey in entrepreneurship with a simple idea, but it was one that stemmed from a very personal place. Growing up, my family wasn't rich, and money was often tight. My parents did their best to make sure we had what we needed, but there was always a sense of financial insecurity lingering in the background. As the oldest child, I saw how hard my parents worked to provide for us. My dad worked 2 jobs, while my mom stayed at home and did freelance work from the living room. It wasn't glamorous, but they made it work. I promised myself that I would never put my future family in that kind of position. I would create something of my own, something that could ensure security, stability, and freedom. After college, I went straight into the corporate world. I had a degree in marketing, so I landed a job at a mid-sized tech company in the city. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, and I got to learn from some really smart people. But after a couple of years, something felt off. It wasn't that I wasn't grateful, but I started to realize that I didn't want to climb the corporate ladder. I didn't want to be tied to a desk, working 9 to 5, with little control over my time. I wanted more than just a paycheck. I wanted to build something that had the potential to grow, to make an impact, and to provide financial freedom. So, I started toying with the idea of starting my own business. It wasn't an overnight decision. It took a few years of contemplation. I didn't have a ton of savings, and I didn't have a rich uncle to fund my venture. But what I did have was a passion for problem solving and a willingness to take risks. It also helped that I had some experience in digital marketing, which seemed like a good starting point for an online business. I spent nights reading everything I could find about entrepreneurship, and during the day, I started a small online business offering freelance digital marketing services. It wasn't glamorous, and the first few months were tough. I spent hours prospecting for clients, working late into the night to fulfill orders, and generally feeling like I had bitten off more than I could chew. I had no employees, no real support system, and no clear direction beyond the need to make money. But I kept pushing forward. The turning point came about 6 months into my side hustle when I got my first major client. They were a small e-commerce company, and they were struggling to get noticed in a crowded market. They had a good product, but their online presence was practically non-existent. I worked with them closely, creating targeted ads, optimizing their website, and implementing a social media strategy. Within a couple of months, their sales doubled. It was a breakthrough moment for me. I realized that this wasn't just about providing a service. This was about helping businesses grow and succeed. Word of mouth started to spread, and soon enough, I was getting more inquiries than I could handle. I had to make a decision. Keep doing this as a side gig or take the leap and go full-time. After a lot of late-night thinking and discussions with my partner, I decided to take the plunge. I quit my corporate job and went full-time with my business. The first few months were chaotic. I was still learning the ins and outs of running a business, handling taxes, setting up a proper accounting system, figuring out how to manage clients efficiently. But one thing I learned quickly was the importance of customer service. I treated every client like they were my only client, and I went above and beyond to ensure their success. I listened to their needs, tailored my services to their goals, and kept them updated on the progress of their campaigns. My clients appreciated that level of dedication, and many of them came back for additional work or referred me to others. As the business grew, I realized that I couldn't do everything myself. I had to hire a team. I started small, bringing on a couple of freelancers to help with the workload. They were experts in areas I wasn't as strong in, like graphic design and content writing, and their skills complemented mine perfectly. With a small but dedicated team, we were able to take on more clients and deliver better results. It wasn't long before we hit our first major milestone, 6 figures in revenue. I was ecstatic. It felt like all the hard work was finally paying off. But what I didn't realize at the time was that this was just the beginning. Success brought new challenges. Managing a growing team meant more responsibilities, and I had to learn how to delegate effectively. I also had to make tough decisions, like letting go of clients that weren't a good fit or cutting back on services that were eating up too much of our resources. One of the most difficult decisions I made was to pivot my business model. Initially, I had focused solely on offering digital marketing services, but over time, I realized that many of my clients needed more than just marketing. They needed help with building their brand and positioning themselves in the market. So, I made the decision to expand my services to include branding and business strategy. It was a risk, but it paid off. Not only did it allow me to offer more value to my clients, but it also helped me differentiate myself from competitors. The next few years were a whirlwind of growth. We expanded our team, improved our processes, and took on more clients than I ever thought possible. But even with all the success, I never forgot where I came from. I stayed grounded and continued to work hard every day. The sense of financial security and freedom that I had longed for was finally a reality. I was in control of my time, my business, and my future. But I also realized that success wasn't just about making money. It was about making an impact. As my business grew, I started to focus on giving back. I offered pro bono work to small nonprofits and startups that couldn't afford my services. I mentored young entrepreneurs and shared my knowledge with others who were starting out. I wanted to show them that it was possible to build something from nothing, just as I had done. Today, my business is still going strong, and we've diversified into different markets. I've got a fantastic team, loyal clients, and the freedom to live life on my own terms. I look back at the journey and realize that the hardest part wasn't the late nights or the sleepless months. It was the mindset shift I had to make. I had to stop thinking of myself as an employee and start thinking like a business owner. Once I did that, everything started to click. I still have a long way to go, but the key takeaway from my journey is this. Entrepreneurship isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it and using it to grow. And I'll never stop learning. Let me take you back to when I was 22, fresh out of college with an empty bank account and a head full of dreams. I had graduated with a degree in marketing, but I had no clear direction on where I was going. I'd always been entrepreneurial in my mindset, but I lacked the execution. I didn't come from money, and my family wasn't exactly supportive of risky ventures. They were all about job security and the steady paycheck, so the whole idea of me starting a business seemed like a far-off fantasy. But I was determined. I just needed a shot. It all started one evening at a local coffee shop. I was sitting there, scrolling through social media, trying to distract myself from the overwhelming pressure to find a real job. I came across an ad that caught my attention, a workshop for aspiring entrepreneurs. It wasn't expensive, but it still made me hesitant. I had just spent my last few $100s on rent, and my bank account balance was nearly zero. But something told me that this workshop was the opportunity one needed. I scraped together enough to attend, borrowing a bit from a friend. The event was hosted by a guy who had turned a small online business into a multi-million-dollar company. The stories he told were inspiring, but what struck me the most was how ordinary he seemed. He wasn't some genius or tech wizard. He was just a guy who had taken risks, learned from his mistakes, and kept pushing forward. It made me realize that maybe I could do it too. I left the workshop with a fire in my belly and a plan to start my own business. I had no idea what I wanted to sell, but I knew I wanted to build something that would allow me to be my own boss. I started doing what any aspiring entrepreneur would do: research. I spent hours scrolling through Amazon, eBay, and other e-commerce platforms, looking for niches that seemed underserved but had potential. It took a few weeks of trial and error before I stumbled across a gap in the market that seemed perfect: high-quality, eco-friendly phone accessories. I knew nothing about manufacturing, but I figured if other people could do it, I could too. I reached out to suppliers from overseas and started negotiating prices. The first few months were tough. I spent my evenings learning how to build a website, set up an online store, and market my products. I made mistakes left and right. My first website was ugly. My product descriptions were terrible. I spent hours trying to figure out how to get traffic to my site, only to see little to no sales. But I kept going, learning, tweaking, and adapting. The breakthrough came when I realized that I wasn't just selling phone accessories, I was selling a lifestyle. I started focusing my marketing on the eco-friendly aspect of the products, positioning them as sustainable and stylish. I ran a small ad campaign targeting environmentally conscious consumers, and it worked. Sales began to trickle in, then snowball. I reinvested every penny back into the business, adding more products, improving my website, and expanding my marketing efforts. Slowly but surely, I started seeing real growth. I won't lie, there were moments of doubt. There were nights when I'd stare at my laptop, wondering if it was all worth it. There were months when I barely scraped by, and I questioned whether I was chasing an impossible dream. But I kept pushing. I reached out to other entrepreneurs for advice, joined online forums, and read countless books and articles. Over time, I learned to trust my gut more, make better decisions, and most importantly, fail faster. When something didn't work, I learned to move on quickly and try something new. One of the hardest lessons I learned was about cash flow. I made the mistake of spending too much money on inventory up front, and when sales didn't meet projections, I was stuck with a ton of stock I couldn't sell. I had to take out a small loan just to keep the business afloat. That experience taught me the importance of managing cash flow, and I became obsessed with the financials of the business. It wasn't glamorous, but understanding numbers became one of the most important skills I developed. As the business grew, I reached a point where I couldn't handle everything on my own. I hired my first employee, a virtual assistant, to help with customer service. It was a huge leap for me. Letting go of control was difficult, but it was necessary if I wanted the business to scale. I hired more people, and we moved into a small warehouse to store inventory. We started building a team, and for the first time, I felt like I was no longer alone in this journey. By the time I was 26, the business had reached 6 figures in revenue, and I was finally able to pay myself a decent salary. It wasn't easy, and there were still plenty of challenges ahead, but I was proud of what I had accomplished. It wasn't just about the money, it was about proving to myself that I could build something from nothing. Fast forward to today, and my business is now a 7-figure operation. We've expanded our product line to include a variety of eco-friendly accessories, and we've built a loyal customer base. We've also started offering B2B services, selling to other retailers, and expanding our reach. I've learned a lot over the years about business, about leadership, and about myself. But the most important lesson I've learned is that success doesn't happen overnight. It's a long, messy, and often painful journey. There were moments when I wanted to give up, when I thought the odds were too stacked against me. But persistence pays off. Taking calculated risks, learning from failures, and continually adapting is the secret sauce. Today, I'm able to travel the world, meet incredible people, and do work that I truly love. The best part? I've created jobs and opportunities for others, and I can now help other aspiring entrepreneurs by mentoring them and sharing the lessons I've learned. I'm still growing, still learning, but looking back at the person I was at 22, I never would have believed how far I could come. It's been a wild ride, and it's far from over. I have no idea where the future will take me, but I know one thing for sure. I'm not stopping anytime soon. To anyone reading this who's thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple. Just start. It won't be perfect, and you'll make mistakes. But every step forward is a step closer to your goal. The hardest part is getting started. Once you do, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. Keep going, and don't let fear hold you back. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.